The Chaouk name once sent shivers through Melbourne's western suburbs. From the moment mature Chaouk arrived from Lebanon in 1969, the family built more than a home. They built an empire. Their fortress on the block became the center of a world ruled by drugs, guns, and fear. At their peak, the Chaouks were tied to outlaw bikie gangs, controlled a narcotics pipeline, and sparked a blood feud so intense it left 72 shootings in just 6 months. But what made their story darker was betrayal from rivals, from the law, and eventually from within their own bloodline. This is not just about crime. It's about how power, paranoia, and vengeance turned a family dynasty into a cautionary tale. Stick around, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. From Lebanon's battlefields to Melbourne's streets. The story of the Chaouk family isn't one of simple heroes or villains. It's layered, messy, and soaked in both survival and destruction. Mature Chaouk, the family's patriarch, stepping off a plane in 1969, leaving behind Lebanon's brutal civil war. But he wasn't escaping violence. He was carrying its weight with him. In Brooklyn, a working-class corner of Melbourne, Mature played the part of the hardworking migrant father. Yet behind that ordinary image, something darker was growing. Violence doesn't disappear just because you cross an ocean. It follows. And in the Chaouk family's case, it would soon erupt in ways no one could ignore. The fortress on the block. By the late 1970s, the Chaouk home didn't look like any ordinary house on the street. Neighbors couldn't help but notice the sudden changes. Security cameras going up, fences growing higher, barbed wire coiled across the top. Expensive cars rolled in at strange hours of the night. What once seemed like a family home was slowly transforming into a fortress, a stronghold built for something more than just shelter. The tension around the house was no illusion. Violence wasn't far away, and soon, clashes with both rivals and police would make the Chaouk name a regular feature in local headlines. The darker side of their story was surfacing. It began in the mid-1970s when Mature Chaouk allegedly faced assault charges. By 1983, his drug trafficking conviction confirmed what many had already suspected. The family was stepping into the world of crime. And this was only the beginning. Before long, the Chaouks were running a narcotics empire that stretched across Melbourne's underworld, their reach extending deep into the city's criminal networks. Allegedly, even outlaw bikie gangs like the Hells Angels were within their circle of influence.
The brewing blood feud. What made the Chaouk story stand out wasn't just their rise in crime. It was the sheer ferocity of their wars. At the center of it all was a bitter, generational feud with the Hadara family. These weren't distant rivals. They were once neighbors. But that closeness only fueled the hatred. It started small, with street disputes, drug turf, insults that cut too deep, threats exchanged between families. But soon, the words turned to bullets, and Melbourne's western suburbs became battlegrounds. At the feud's peak, there were 72 shootings in just 6 months. Night after night, drive-by gunfire shook the streets, leaving entire neighborhoods on edge. In many ways, the Hadaras and the Chaouks were reflections of each other. Both had fled bloodshed in the Middle East, only to bring those same grudges and that same hunger for respect into Australia's tight-knit migrant communities. And these wars weren't simple mafia disputes over money. They were vendettas, where pride and shame carried just as much weight as power. A single insult could ignite months of bloodshed. Drugs, guns, and untouchable wealth. Beneath all the shootings and street feuds lay the real engine of the Chaouk empire, drugs. This wasn't small-time dealing on corners. The Chaouks built a full-scale operation, overseas shipments feeding the pipeline, street-level soldiers moving product, launderers scrubbing millions in dirty cash, and muscle ready to enforce their dominance. When police finally forced their way inside the family stronghold, what they uncovered told the full story. Shotguns, handguns, stashes of narcotics, even blank passports. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, a shadow state operating inside Melbourne. And the deeper investigators looked, the clearer the paranoia became. Meetings shifted constantly between safe houses. Cars were swapped out like clockwork. Entire phone lines would go dark for hours to block wiretaps. And for anyone suspected of betrayal, even if they shared family blood, there was no mercy. The Chaouk code was brutal. Strike first before they strike you. Betrayal from within. As the years rolled on, the deadliest threat to the Chaouk dynasty didn't come from rival gangs with guns, or even from Task Force Echo's relentless detectives. It came from inside their own walls. In the criminal world, betrayal isn't just a betrayal, it's a death sentence. By the late 2000s, whispers began echoing through back alleys and prison yards. Someone from within the Chaouk circle had flipped, leaking the family's most guarded secrets, their safe houses, meeting spots, drug routes. But who? A bitter cousin nursing a grudge? A brother buried in debt? Or maybe an underboss cracking under the weight of a long prison stretch? No one knew for sure, and that uncertainty made everyone dangerous.
The paranoia finally boiled over after a massive police raid, triggered by fresh intel, turned up a staggering haul: guns, bulletproof vests, and kilos of drugs. With every bust, the family's unity cracked further. Brothers started eyeing each other with suspicion. Cousins disappeared without a word. Even the youngest weren't spared. Dragged into courtrooms, forced to choose between testifying against their own blood or facing years behind bars. The killing of patriarch Mature Chaouk, August 13, 2010. A quiet Melbourne morning. Kids were playing in the yards next door when a gunman slipped up to the fence of the Chaouk compound. One single shot, fired over the garden wall, ended it all. Mature Chaouk, the man who had built an empire and survived decades of raids, arrests, and bloody feuds, was killed instantly. The family's patriarch was gone. The message was chilling, aimed not just at his enemies, but at his own fractured clan. No one was untouchable. The motive? Pure payback. The method? Cold and calculated. Police quickly turned their eyes toward the Hadara family. But in a world ruled by vendettas and betrayals, the truth was never so simple. It could have been anyone. What came next showed just how deep the rage ran. The Chaouks went public, vowing revenge in a statement that shook Melbourne's underworld. His blood does not come cheap, especially in Ramadan. A dynasty in ruin. The murder of Mature Chaouk sent shockwaves through Melbourne's underworld. The family's fortress, once seen as a symbol of power and protection, now felt more like a cage of fear. Every move was cautious, every look over the shoulder loaded with suspicion. No one knew who could be trusted anymore. The violence didn't stop, it escalated. Shots rang out in nightclubs, car bombs tore through suburban streets, and former allies were left bloodied in brutal beatings. Each act of vengeance sparked another, trapping the Chaouks in an endless cycle of blood for blood. But outside forces were tightening their grip. Task Force Echo ramped up its raids, stripping away what remained of the Chaouk Empire. Guns, cash, and drugs vanished into police evidence lockers. More damaging than the seizures was the blow to their reputation. Their once untouchable image shattered. One by one, key figures were dragged into courtrooms and locked away. The name Chaouk, once spoken with fear, now carried the weight of both notoriety and downfall. For the wider community, a fragile peace finally began to settle. But the scars left behind on families, on neighborhoods, and on Melbourne's streets were permanent. Inside the courtroom, the conspiracies of the Chaouks. As gunfire on the streets slowed, the real battles moved inside the courtroom. The trials were chaotic, often bordering on the absurd. Family members turned on each other, accusations flew, and confessions were made only to be taken back. The most infamous twist came during the trial for the murder of Mohammed Hadara. Ahmed Hablas, a relative of the Chaouks, first admitted to pulling the trigger, claiming he acted only in self-defense. But later, he changed his story, saying he'd confessed out of fear of what the Chaouk clan might do to him if he hadn't. The revelation stunned the jury and left the entire courtroom rattled. The judge's response cut deep. They can blame each other and walk away, and that's not in the interests of justice. It was a brutal truth and a fitting metaphor for the family's downfall. What was once a united front had shattered into lies, betrayals, and suspicion, each member dragging the others down in their struggle to survive. The legacy: power, trauma, and cautionary tales. Perhaps the darkest truth in the Chaouk story isn't found in the drugs, the guns, or even the murders. It's in what it reveals about family and loyalty. For decades, the Chaouks used the word honor to excuse everything: the violence, the intimidation, the silence that kept people in line. But when the dust settled, their pursuit of power left behind nothing but broken trust and deep scars carried across generations. The very traits that once made them strong, their loyalty to each other, their refusal to back down, were the same forces that tore them apart. Today, Melbourne's western suburbs breathe a little easier, but underneath that calm, there's still unease. In the underworld, peace is rarely permanent. It's just a fragile ceasefire. The Chaouk legacy isn't just a collection of headlines or courtroom sagas. It's a warning, a reminder that in organized crime, betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from within your own blood. For those looking past the headlines, the Chaouk story is bigger than drugs and drive-bys. It's a lesson in how empires rise, how they crumble, and how, in the end, the most dangerous enemies are often the ones you call family.